Hi, I'm Shannon Cyr, and I'm the relationship coach for men. Today, we're talking about gaslighting, right? So, what is it? I mean, I think everybody's kind of heard of it. You know, Defined by psychology today, gaslighting is a form of persistent manipulation and brainwashing, right, that causes the victim to doubt him or herself and ultimately lose their own sense of perception, identity, and self worth. So, um, kind of a huge deal, right? Kind of a big thing. And, I think most people are kind of familiar with the term from the movie, in the 1940s called Gaslight. It's the one where the husband tries to convince his wife that she's insane. And so he does this really by kind of causing her to question herself and her reality day to day, things that happen and go on, right? And so within a relationship, this can look many different ways. And when you see brainwashing as part of the definition, it sounds pretty scary, but that brainwashing can really happen slowly over time and really in ways that we don't expect. So, sometimes we don't even really recognize it as such. So today, I really want to look at gaslighting inside of your marriage. And reason being is that, I hear this term a lot with my clients when they're describing their relationships. And so I think it's important to take a look at this and start to really pay attention to it and really notice if that's what's happening to you and call attention to it, more importantly. So, people think that gaslighting is something that really, tends to only happen to women, but it's not. So when a new client kind of shows up and needs to start working through their relationship, there's kind of some things that typically stand out when gaslighting is something that's, present in the relationship. And so, usually there's a whole lot of self-doubt, kind of to the point of where, the person's really doubting themselves at every single turn. They question every action. They're just really not able to really make any decisions. They really lack confidence emotionally, don't really have a strong sense of self. Maybe that's something that was present before, but it just isn't there anymore. So, decision making and being sure of what has happened is really, really difficult. They're just not even sure that they remember anything correctly anymore. And so, when this happens, identity gets defined by something outside of the self. And typically that is going to be through the eyes of the person that's doing the gaslighting. And so that's why it's so debilitating. It's not just a bad behavior or hurtful behavior. It's so much more than that. It's debilitating because it can take the strongest of people and over time really turn them into the person that doesn't know how to move forward, really isn't sure of any decisions, questioning everything that's happened. So I want to share an example. My client Max has that's not his real name, but he's been married for 14 years now, and he spent, I would say, the last 7 or 8 of them really just paralyzed in doubt. He's really no longer sure of anything. Whenever there's an argument, it's his fault. Whenever he tries to explain something that's happened or how he feels about it, he's told that he's wrong or that he doesn't remember it correctly. Usually, his wife will tell him things like, "I didn't say that," or "You're just remembering it wrong. That isn't what happened. I don't know what you're talking about." Things like that. Sometimes she'll tell him that he's actually the one that said or did certain things. And, there's times when he really feels like he knows for sure exactly what happened and what he said. But now those times are really few and far between. And so anymore, he wonders if maybe he's just really remembering everything wrong, right? And so this didn't happen overnight. It started out with him defending his position, his memory of events, trying to explain things, long conversations, long arguments. He would try to reason with her and go back over everything that was said, everything that happened, point out exactly the chain of events, everything that had gone on. And each time he did this, she would turn it around on him, deny his point of view, and he would just keep trying. And so, he would approach it from every angle that he could. Hours and hours and hours would pass with him trying to reason. But every time it ended up with him feeling like this was just crazy and that he wasn't making any progress. And, you know, the more it happened, the more it just didn't make any sense. Right. And so, you know, that's kind of his experience. Right. So what about the person that is really the one doing the gaslighting? So, you know, this person they're really not interested in talking about issues, not interested in trying to come up with a solution. You know, they really want to offload the responsibility for anything that's going on in their lives. So, you know, whatever they're not happy with, they're going to place that blame somewhere else. They're always going to kind of be in what I would say is the victim role, in that it's like all these bad things are happening, but it's somebody else's fault, right? So they're not going to see themselves as the victim. They're going to see themselves really as the more powerful person. So, you know, whatever's going on in their lives that isn't going the way that they want it to, it isn't their fault. They're going to blame someone else. Typically, they're going to take a lot of that blame and they're just going to lay it right there at your feet, right? Now, that doesn't mean that you have to pick it up, but oftentimes that's kind of the problem, right? We pick it up. And if you pick it up and you carry it with you, then that's definitely going to impact you for sure. So if this is happening in your relationship and you're aware of it, I want you to really kind of start thinking about that. Kind of start sounding the alarm bell, so to speak, right? Because I think what happens is that sometimes when we put a label on something, you know, and we recognize it and we say, oh, well, this is gaslighting, right? Then we start to kind of normalize that. And, you know, we start to kind of think things like, well, you know, everybody kind of deals with this to some degree. It's really not that often, or maybe a little bit of it is okay. It's not that bad, but it's not okay. You know, if we go back to the definition where there's, you know, psychological manipulation, that's just not okay at all. You know, using manipulation to get your needs met at the expense of someone else is not okay. So if it's present for you, then you really need to start taking it seriously, right? And maybe you know it's present, you know, and you know it's serious, and you are just kind of wondering what happens next. You know, what do I do about this? Is it ever going to change? Well, you know, why do people change? You know, let's kind of talk about why people change. Yeah, you know, first of all, no one changes because we want them to. You know, just because we ask and we point something out, they're not simply going to say, oh, okay, you know, I won't do that anymore, right? I mean, we've all tried that, and we've seen that it doesn't work. Second, and I think you've heard me say this before, is that, you know, nobody wakes up on a random Tuesday and suddenly has this epiphany where they think, oh gosh, you know, I've been gaslighting my partner, and that's so destructive and so hurtful. You know, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to do it differently. I don't want to be that person, right? It's just not going to happen, you know. Of course, we might love to think that it will, but it won't. And so third, you know, you can't change anything that you're not willing to see. And so most people who gaslight, they can't see that they're doing it at all. They don't see there's anything wrong with what they're doing, and they really feel completely justified. This is just their way of getting their needs met. So if they don't see anything wrong with it, then they're not likely going to change it, right? If someone is gaslighting and they don't recognize they're doing it, and they can't say the words and take responsibility and action, then there isn't going to really be any change. And so, so I want to say that again and be really clear so you can tell yourself the truth. You know, your partner's not going to change unless they can really say, hey, you know, I realize I've been gaslighting and that's not who I want to be, and I don't want to do this. And then they have to really take action. And, you know, action isn't reading a book or watching a YouTube video like this. You know, it's really serious. And, you know, this is a serious habitual behavior, right? So action is going to be, you know, going to a psychotherapist's office every week for years, you know, really working on this and working on what created it and getting new tools to be able to do a relationship differently. being able to find ways to get their needs met differently. And so they really would have to create new habits and unlearn, you know, this behavior and what they've learned and what they've been doing for so long. So when I say, you know, when I say they really would have to go to a psychotherapist's office every week for years, that's pretty much what's going to be needed, you know, to really be able to unwind something like this. And so if they're not willing to do any of that, you have to not lie to yourself. You know, you have to really be able to look at that. You know, telling yourself things like, well, maybe she won't do it for very long, or maybe it will change, or um, things have been going pretty well lately. You know, maybe it's going to get better. That's not stable. You know, that's really fragile, and that's something that can change and break at any moment. And so that doesn't feel good, right? So again, you know, if you're aware that it's present, you have to tell yourself the truth about that and about what the relationship truly can and cannot ever be, and then make some real choices for yourself, whether you're willing and able to live like that, and whether or not you can stay in a relationship that isn't likely ever to look any different. I hope this was helpful for you. You know, if so, please subscribe to the channel. If you want to know when I post a new video, all you have to do is hit the bell in the upper right corner. If you would like to explore working with me directly as a private client, I invite you to schedule a complimentary exploratory session with me. All my best.